Game begin.
How are we feeling? Do we have any pre-show thoughts? I hit record, so pre-show thoughts.
Did you hit record?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to start this in medias res because I think I'm going to tell a hilarious story, and then you guys are going to do most of the talking because the star of the episode is David. Lanny, you were our fake Selden also ran, but I guess also piloted the
budget.
Deck. I guess,
budget.
Budget Selden. That's cool. So I won't say very much other than I probably should have given David more props when I was commenting his finals match last year, and I will just take the fifth that it was Lanny's fault that he's always told me, oh no, mono blue sucks, you got to play blue white.
It is 1,000% my fault. Yeah.
And I was just programmed by my supposedly nicer co-host. But yeah, I did.
Well, behind closed doors, I'm just horrible. I'm just super toxic. I'm just look at this guy's Mistress Factories. What a
look
disgrace!
At how his Mistress Factories demolished.
I was like, those Mistress Factories have probably done 6 damage lifetime. There's just no way.
He sides them out. They suck so bad.
That's true.
That is true. Targets for Wasteland. I actually love that dimension of the deck where everyone's just like, oh, you added targets for Wasteland. It's like, side them out if they have Wasteland. Like, what? Siding out lands.
They have a colorless spell that does nothing. It's all the basics. It's like,
all right. Anyway, because of all those things, I'm going to tell a hilarious story, and then you guys will do most of the talking this episode.
All right, welcome to Spy Colony. We have a special guest on the line, David Raczka, the chief technologist of pre-modern Wakanda. Hi, David.
Hello.
All right, so, Lanny, I hate analogies.
Yeah, you just have to stop saying that, but yeah.
So I hate analogies, but I just like to tell a story. So I was talking to my friend Zach Hill this morning. Zach, if you may know Zach, is a ex-member of R&D, also a loose scholar, also a Pro Tour Top 8 competitor. But really, the core of this story is that Zach is a Memphis boy. SWB's a Memphis boy too, right?
Nashville, but yeah.
Well, this story takes place in Memphis. So in the early days of FedEx, Federal Express, they used to route everything through Memphis. They had a super fulfillment center in Memphis. And one day, they have all these conveyor belts and all this stuff that route all of the packages. They come into Memphis and they reroute them out elsewhere in the United States, if not the world. So one day, all the conveyor belts stop. Everything stops. And the owner of FedEx is like, oh my God, we're losing thousands of dollars with every minute of all these conveyor belts stopping. First, they think that there's an electrical problem. Look around, but the lights are still on. So he calls the repair dude, and he's just like, repair dude, this is so bad, everything stopped. Repair dude's like, don't worry, owner of Federal Express, I'm 5 minutes away. Walks in. Repair dude looks around. All the conveyor belts are stopped, but the lights are still on. He looks to a single pole in the center of the room, walks to the pole, opens a little box, tiny little box, takes out a screwdriver, adjusts a single screw by 1/4 inch. All of a sudden, all the conveyor belts are going. The owner of Federal Express is like, oh my God, you saved my business. What do I owe you? Repair dude's like $10,000.
Yeah.
The Federal Express guy is just like, huh? How long you been here? It's just like $10,000. He's like, would you like to give me an itemized bill for that? He's like, sure. Takes a pen, writes down itemized bill, hands it to him. Owner of Federal Express looks at the itemized bill, laughs, goes to the safe, takes $10,000 in cash, and hands it to the repair dude. There were 2 things written on the itemized bill. Number 1, turn a screw, $1. Number 2, know which screw to turn, $9,999. And with that, I hand it off to Dr. Surf and Turf himself and Budget Brian Selden, Manny Huang.
So we're going to do Spy Colony's third ever clickbait podcast. The first 2, of course, being tier list podcasts. People love them, and we're never gonna stop making them. But this is gonna be Spy Colony's, I think, first real deck tech. So I'm excited to have it. But first, we should get the storytelling and the background in. So tell us about, first your whole, got into pre-modern story, and then tell us about the journey for Mono Blue Dreadnought.
Yeah, for sure. I went to my first Eternal weekend. I haven't played much, but we have a pretty good legacy scene in Rochester, and one of our fellow players said, "Oh man, you played back in the day. You better like pre-modern. That might be something you like." And he's telling me about the format, and basically every Sunday we had 50 to 70 people at our shop basically playing pre-modern, because we were all like 10-year-old, 12-year-old kids. We didn't have Mandrains. We didn't have Bizarre Bagdads.
Did you say 50 to 70? You're full of shit.
50 to 70.
Yeah.
They had it tiered. You paid $2, and if you went 3-1, you got 3 packs, or you could play for free. And if you went 3-1 or something, you got 1 pack.
Wait. So you're talking about back in the 90s, like back in the 2000s.
2000, early 2000s.
Okay, so you're talking about what your scene was like at the store. This was in Rochester?
This is in Rochester. Yeah, they played. It was before the split of Type 1 fan list.
Okay.
Type 1.5.
That's actually very similar to me, because we didn't have 50 to 70 in Rochester. We were in San Diego, and we would fire 5 or 6 rounders of 30 to 40 people. We didn't have space for 50 to 70.
What frequency are you guys talking about?
Weeklies.
Like weeklies,
50 to 70 every week?
What was Neutral Ground?
I didn't play Neutral Ground back then. I didn't start playing Neutral Ground until until like 99 when I moved to New York. It's interesting. I would come up to New York to win PTQs, and people would be like, "Oh, we're all drafting at Neutral Ground afterwards," and I'm like, "No, I got to get on the bus back to Philadelphia." So I never actually, even though I was winning tournaments in New York, never actually played a Neutral Ground until I moved to New York in 99.
Yeah, so you never did a weekly. So so you were playing Type 1.5 in the early 2000s.
Yeah. First deck was Goblin Sly.
Yeah. Goblin Sly.
Second deck, I had Oath of Druids with Spike Feeder and Spike Weaver. It was just basically casual pre-modern before pre-modern existed.
I actually love this because it was before Legacy got ruined by people who were good at Magic.
Yeah,
it was like
basically.
So that's post Flash Hulk Columbus, right? Like that's
pre.
No.
But
when
after
Legacy is ruined,
Legacy gets ruined by. I mean, it doesn't get ruined, but obviously it changes forever once there's Legacy GPs and whatnot.
Look, once there's Legacy GPs, right? Like before Flash Hulk Columbus, you have Legacy mains who are basically us, right? Like we're pre-modern mains, and we're just like, we understand our format.
Yeah.
Surely, if all the pros came in, nothing would change.
We're like
that's
building.
How people thought about Legacy before Billy Moreno, Michael Jason.
We just discovered fire. We just discovered rubbing 2 rocks, and then some people are going to arrive on the coast of pre-modern with flamethrowers and rifles.
Prior to Flash Hulk, people were using Ancient Tomb to cast Wrathy Pit Dragon and Exalted Angel.
Yeah,
that was the best.
Well, I actually do want to talk about, because I just love that you mentioned some decks. So my LGS, I was playing lots of standard ports, but this is also the era of like Solidarity and Iggy Pop. I tried to play Scepter Chant in Legacy. I tried to play Slide in Legacy. I had a friend who played False Cure. That same friend also played a just an Oath deck that pooped out a Chroma. And
I just like to welcome David to the Spike Colony podcast. He's in the middle of a story, and we've derailed this 3 different ways.
I'm just excited
all
to
the terrible Legacy decks that Lanny played.
I'm just excited to talk about. I'm just excited to talk about the early 2000s. I mean, it was just such a great time. But anyways,
I lost the last round of GP Flash to Lee Scott Vargas. I played Lands, which has a basically 0 win percentage against Flash. I thought it was hilarious. I even day-two'd with that deck, but Lee Scott Vargas is a master. And
how many Flash were in the top 8? 3?
I think it was 3. But like the winner, he didn't even pick up the deck. He didn't even know how it worked.
The winner was my apprentice, Steve Sadin. That deck was made in my apartment the week before.
Yeah.
Right, so he at the middle of the way through day one, Owen Turtenwald asked him to explain how to go off, and he couldn't do it.
Yeah, of course. That's the classic
That's like
story.
the famous story. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So anyway, that's what I grew up with. I played every weekend, all the, survival decks, all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
And so when we went to Eternal Weekend, he said, "Yeah, you probably would like this format." And I do like dual lands, but I do like that they're not in pre-modern in a way, because it does challenge your noggin in a different way.
Yeah, you figure out just to play Mishra's Factory in your mono blue deck. If you had dual lands, that would never happen.
It would probably just be Grotog at that point,
Yeah, absolutely. Just
So
give me
I
that
played
tropical
that.
island.
And we do basically rotating monthly tournaments between pre-modern, legacy, and vintage. And so I started playing land tax. I was like, all the cards are never gonna get banned. Nothing rotates.
Yeah.
Foils. I'm like, I'm gonna make it look really pretty. I'm gonna get all the foils, everything, blinged out. And then they ban land tax, and I'm like, okay, well, that was stupid of me. And
that was roughly around when we first started corresponding. Was after last year's Lobstercon, we started talking parfait quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
When you say they, you're talking about a single man, a single villain, somewhere in Europe, right now, looking over his stack of I don't know,
shorted land taxes.
Shorted land taxes. It's like He's like, I'm going to get David Raczka's blinged out land taxes.
I get it from like a tournament organizer or casual, people don't like playing against it. So I get it.
Yeah.
But,
we had actually, our Airbnb contained myself, Rich Shea, and Sam Black all at the same time on Thursday night. And so we had long talks about land tax. Sam was just like, money match me with every single deck you think. He was like, do you want to do money matches of every single deck you think could be land tax? But I think you and I maybe...
Notably, Lanny declined.
Yeah.
However, forced me to play a money match against the 75 card mirror.
It was
the greatest red player in the format.
It was a charity money match. And who won, Mike? Who won?
I won and convinced.
All right. So anyways,
that sounds like content to me. I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you for the call out. No, just real quick. We like our discussion was just like land tax may or may not have been broken. It probably was, but it would have been nice to see what happened, for a few months of like, I would have liked the meta to just get to the next level where there was more Grotog, there was more, decks that were sort of mid-rangey that were good against land tax, good at disrupting the engine. And we just sort of never got to that point because of overall grumpiness.
I'm glad that Lobstercon wasn't 30 people and that we all still play.
But I think that from a logistics standpoint, it should have been like, the meta should have just been like, 25% land tax, 25% like really teched out goblins decks, 25% like blue-white Dreadnought, and 25% Grotog goes crazy in that metagame. But I don't know. I would have liked to see it, but the problem was Parfait was never going to grow in meta share just on vibes. And if it did, then it would just create more mirror matches, and then it would ruin tournaments. So
I, on the other hand, am interested to hear about the rotating tournaments that David's talking about. And apparently, they get big turnouts for pre-modern in. Well,
tell us about Rochester Royal. So you do weeklies. What's the attendance like? What's the vibe like?
So we have monthlies, and then we have some special events. It's the bar. People are having a good time. We allow full proxy, so there's a big college area, so people are, proxying up a deck. And then we also have people who've been playing for 20 plus years, having all real cards. So it's a melding pot, and it's super fun. We want to get some bigger events, and actually the TOs asked what would get you guys out to Rochester Royals event.
Oh.
What is it, a 4 or 5 hour drive?
From New York City, I I rarely go to New York City, so I wouldn't know.
It's a little bit. I mean, we can talk about that offline. I already want to go to the Massachusetts Quarterly, and right now the travel budget for pre-modern is stretched thin, and I'm not talking about money.
I feel like, we had Renaissance is the wrong word because it didn't exist. Like Renaissance is like it was a rebirth, right? But the Star City events. The Star City events having the $1,000 1Ks at the back end of the SCG cons actually created our competitive culture here in the last year. Because what ended up happening was a couple of us were like, "Oh wow, SCG supporting pre-modern. Let's get out to this." And then Dave Kaplan, who's one of the seminal members of our community, is like, "Why? I'll just throw a 1K at the volleyball court." And then Sonny's just like, "Why? I'll just throw a 1K at the brewery." And Ashok's like, "Why? I'll just throw a 1K at Bearded," right? And like, so wait a minute, we could just have our own 1Ks and people will come to our events and we don't have to drive out to Connecticut or whatever. I'm like, sign me up. And then we've had like what 6-8 1Ks in the last year as a result of this. And so SNG created it by creating demand, and then none of us went to their events. Instead, we just created by we, I mean people who were way better organized than I am, created all of the volleyball and brewery and other brewery and Bearded Dragon events that we've all been playing at.
I mean, it's just got to be, I think, talking about community building, I think inertia has a lot to do with it. Like the dress crew stuff where they go weekly, monthly, quarterly, like that's ramped up, right? So a few times, they just kind of did it and it was like win a Mox Simon, but it wasn't about the prize. It was just that like these guys were extremely fun to play Magic and hang out with and be around. I mean, we saw that at Lobstercon. It's a shame we couldn't make it, but just like the vibe was super good, and that's the problem with being Wakandan, right? Is that like I met a bunch of the Worcester guys. I meet more and more of them each year, and talk to them more and more. And so a big part of me wanting to get out to Massachusetts is just to hang out with them. And we've met a few of the Rochester crew. A car came down to one of the early Bearded Dragon tournaments. So I've gotten a chance to talk to them, and of course I'd love to see you in person and meet, but I think you should just do it and then start vacuuming up
if we had a reason to have a house, I would say 2 years ago I came alone. I didn't know anybody. Like I was friends with like David Tao, he didn't even go, right? I was friends with Mano, but like I knew literally no one. I went to Lobstercon, made third place. Decided this was the best time I had in 20 years playing Magic. Last year, I did terrible. Like I didn't top 8.
Second place in the side event.
Second place in the side event, but I had the best weekend of my life, more or less. I mean, it's put aside my kids or whatever. I love my kids, right? But I mean, of just like playing Magic or whatever.
Necessary disclaimer.
No, you can't just be like, oh, this is the best weekend of my life. You have moments with family and stuff that are different. But I'm talking about like the camaraderie, etc., of just like being in the house and sharing in like Lanny's success, Itai's success. David Tao winning the event like last year. I got more out of that and more bonding and stuff than I ever had from like winning an event myself. And I wish we could like bottle the kind of fun stuff that we have from like having a house and stuff, but you can't share that widely because like by nature you can't, right? It's by nature an intimate thing. But what I would say is just like, this year I was like, oh, how do we get these guys to come up here? I think the answer is just give us a reason to get a house, and we're probably going to have like some really fantastic stories coming out of it, some really fantastic bonding coming out of it. And the fact that we're playing pre-modern is kind of perpendicular to that.
Yeah, but it takes some ramping up though, obviously, because part of it is just like it's hard to get a house for a tournament that's going to have like 25 people, whereas like with the like now that Massachusetts is getting 60 every quarterly is getting 50 to 60, it's just coming like, because like I am probably unique in this, but I just feel like the 5-rounders are just a little flat because it's the 302 and the top 8 is super sad. Yeah,
we have them all the time.
Yeah,
anyway.
we have them all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is we originally when Lanny and Phil Nguyen organized the first 1.5K that we had at Bifrost last year. right? So Lanny was talking about I should just eat carbs or whatever. I was just like, I didn't top 8 that event. I'm like, I'm going to quit pre-modern. I'm so salty. And then I had some fried chicken and I'm like, I love pre-modern again. 5 minutes later. When they organized that event, we were aspiring to do like not a competitor to Lobstercon, but like Lobstercon is the North American Pre-Modern Championship. Maybe we could have like the Northeast Pre-Modern Championship or something. We can't really attract a large number of people to New York. It's just too expensive, right? For us to get a big enough spot, and then for people to have lodging and stuff like that. But maybe you could, right? That's the thing. Like it's a space thing and then a lodging thing.
Yeah, I didn't come up with this name, but the Royals thought about doing a Camp David event where we have like camp, and you basically stay at Camp David. And
wait, I thought Camp David is where you get a deck from David Raczka and win Lobstercon after boot camping with him.
I will have
camping is just,
like 8 these decks for people.
Just is according to my story, it's $9,999.
Yeah.
No, which is like people are like, he just turned one screw. Like he did. That's not what he's charging you for.
Yeah. I mean, the deck, it looks pretty similar, but there are some little changes that allow you to play a different kind of game. A lot of the time people.
Let's start from the beginning. Let's go. Okay, 20 minutes in, we got our banter out of the way. Let's start from the beginning.
We did not get our banter out of the way.
We did. But what's when you start playing the deck, what did it look like? Talk to us. What? I mean, the big question mark is I think most people have no idea what was going on before the fall brawl. We kind of pick up winning the fall brawl is like we kind of pick up on the story and we're like, okay, this guy's got Mistress Factories. He's crazy. What's going on?
So I was playing land tax, and I luckily beat Dreadnought in our first pre-modern event because my opponent basically forgot to register 4 counterspell in his deck. So he had 56 cards in his deck, and
so he just had to add 4 islands.
So he had to add 4 islands. So I had a really big, buffer to win that one. But I mean, land tax or Dreadnought is a hard matchup. So I built Dreadnought and I tested both sides, and after land tax got banned, I said, okay, I want to play Dreadnought because I have it built. It's easy to play, and then Meddling Mage is a big problem. I have to give Fran a lot of credit because he sees what people are playing and he just tweaks it slightly, and then he like totally beats the mirror. So the lists that were just mono blue and then got wrecked by the blue white versions, and so I wanted to solve that problem. So that's when I added the 3 factories, misdirection, powder keg to have enough answers to Meddling Mage. And I didn't really test it. I just played the fall brawl. That was like my first person to person testing thing, and I did well there. So it's like, well, this deck is pretty good, I guess.
So that was your first tournament with mono blue.
Yeah, that was my first tournament with mono blue.
But you had 1 Flash of Insight main, 2 Flash of Insight side. So
yeah,
when did you figure out Flash of Insight? Because to my knowledge, I don't know if anybody had cooked up the bright idea to run multiples and just be able to stack your entire, because like when you do one, you're like, you don't have a lot of choice about when you're going to cast it. So sometimes you're going to cast it and it's only going to be for 9, and then the game's going to be over before you get to the next 9. So like having the second copy somewhere in your next top so that you can go first one for 9, next one for 30, and then you finally find your stacked deck. So yeah, tell me about what where that came from.
I just looked at TC decks. I saw people play 1 copy, and I said, "This card looks really good." I mean, I played Think Twice in Standard.
Yeah,
This is like Think Twice on steroids, and you also discard your card. So, I also think that I have played Delver in Legacy. I'm not a very big Delver player, but one of the things in Legacy is that you sometimes change your deck. Like you might side out Wasteland just to increase your spell density. And I think a lot of the matchups in mono blue, you're looking to increase your density of relevant spells, and drawing cards is like the easiest way to do that.
Yeah, and then so this is just super organic. Then you just basically just tossed them in, then you mid game at some point you like flash for 25 and you're like, wait, I should pull out my notebook, and then you start developing your famed shorthand for the bottom of your deck to record and get to.
Yeah, in the fall brawl,
shorthand costs 9,990.
Yeah.
Just in case.
Well, I mean, oh my god, it just occurred to me that we should be marking the front side of our cards so we know which. Wait, is that even? Yeah, it's got to be. I mean, you could have different printings of stuff so that you know when you get to the vision. It doesn't matter. You just count the cards. So now, I just edit this whole part out.
I played against Mono Blue Storm, and I realized that if I don't counter the first Brain Freeze, I have all these flashes in my graveyard, and I can just flash for Stifle on the spot when he Brain Freezes me the second time. And he can't kill me with one freeze.
David is so smart. He's just like siding out Wasteland, and drawing cards increases your spell density, flashing for the Stifle. None of these things have ever occurred to me.
Well,
putting it out there. Like,
yeah, I mean, so I would like to say that there are people who have success with Stifle Knot, and they're on Jamtown, and the way they build their deck is different as well. They might have lower land counts, they might have more cantrips, but in general, I don't think I ever won a game where I haven't drawn extra cards from Gush or Flash, or so basically I'm just playing to my strength. Like, I can't beat someone one up on a burn mirror. I basically have to draw like twice the amount of cards to beat someone. So that's how I
just like go from land tax to Gush, Flash of Insight. Yeah. All you're doing is,
if I don't have 13 cards in my hand, I don't know what I'm doing. So I need the card quality here.
I actually love hearing that. I mean, it was kind of cool. So Windfall Brawl, are you just mainlining Dreadnought for the next monthlies or whatever? Or are you kind of dabbling around?
What kind of personal question is that? That's like asking a woman's weight. Be like, yeah, well, how's the scale looking today, David?
Well, I like Stifle Knot, and I basically would come up with a brew and see if it beat Stifle Knot, and if it did, I'd play it. If it didn't, I wouldn't. So
you weren't playing any brews?
Yeah, I wasn't playing burn. I had a lot of brews that were really wacky, like new combo decks people haven't seen. And I was like, this never beats Stifle Knot. So I'm like, I want to put that away for like a special tournament where you can ban a deck, because there's only a few ways you can beat Stifle Knot, and you kind of have to play into that. You can't just do your own thing and hope to cast 5-mana spells and.
Did I hear you low key start your campaign for PSS 7 or was that? Did you hear that,
Maybe.
Mike? I kind of felt like a little bit of campaigning. I am 1000% on the trail for David Raczka 2025. Nominate my guy. The Architect, PSS 7, your list. I know Flint and Hoyp are listening. Don't worry. The powers that be will get the message. I'll start greasing the wheels.
That's arrogant. How do you know that they're listening? Flint didn't even come to Lobstercon. Apparently he has a girlfriend now.
Rude. Anyways, so Spring Fling rolls around. Spring Fling did not go as well as Fall Brawl.
No, I did 4-0 the first section, and then I played against two Gia's Blessings decks. So the Brain Freeze plan that I've used didn't work. They're both Oath decks. They had Blessings, blue green and blue green white, and it just. So I was looking for something other than Brain Freeze to win the control mirrors or control decks, and then I lost one to Goblins.
You just lose to Goblins.
Yeah, I lost to Goblins, and I lost to Replenish. And Replenish is super hard because if they just have what are you gonna do? Like bring in Powder Keg against Eternal Exalted Angel, or are you going to not? And like if they don't have Exalted Angel, you just have these Powder Kegs that don't do anything. So like
I'd like to send you a bus to Jamtown.
Yeah. It's your only option, except for you're trying to jam against Quad Plowshare, Quad Seal Cleansing, Quad Orms Chant, and then
plus Replenish,
plus Parallax Wave.
That's how Flint beat me in all the games that he beat me when I was on Replenish and he had a Dreadnought deck. He looked at me so red. He's like, I don't think you have it. If you do, I lose. I didn't have it.
It's built different. That guy is built different.
Yeah, so I mean, at that point, I was looking for something else. And one of the things I look for in this deck is like controlling the windows of interaction. So like there's like back to basics, there's Sasabo's Web, there's Winter Orb, all that stuff. But then whenever they feel like it, they can start trying to kill it, and you have to battle it. Where I rather use the mana advantage, where you get up to 7 cards, Portent, get up to 8, Flash, get up to 9, Gush, get up to 13 or whatever, and then go for it. If you let them, basically interact whenever they want to, then they can use all their like standstills, or they can use their fact of fictions, things like that, to like get it back up to 7 cards. But if you never do anything and they have 4 Swords of Plowshares, 3 disenchant in hand, that 8th your removal spell doesn't really do anything, and they can't really fact or fiction because they already have 7 cards. So I was trying to find something that was less interactable than other land destruction spells.
And that's where we got tied.
Yeah. So I go on Discord a bunch, and people talk about stuff, and basically I send my feelers out. Look, how can I be replenished? Because it's basically like I feel like I could beat them, but they add Meddling Mage and Exalted Angel. Now I can't. Or they they pivot slightly different than I'm expecting. I can't get there. And the Parallax Tides, they tap out every single turn, so they can't really hold up interaction. And if they do, it's like 1 mana lake which you can foil or whatever. So the Tides basically just wreck, tap out slow decks, and and it give you breathing room, because they jam, and then they cast Attunement, get rid of all their lands, get more gas. But now they actually have to keep their extra lands because they don't have any. So, and then if they have a Meddling Mage or Exalted Angel, the Chain of Vapor basically bounces it for free, so you don't have to worry about it. So it was basically perfect for replenish. And then I don't think you really needed it against Red Green Oath, but it was pretty phenomenal there too, because after land tax, people started making the lands the way you win, and if you just counter Terravor and Parallax Tide them, they don't have any way to actually put pressure on you.
Yeah, I thought that was. It ended up being like just good because you have something to bore it in, right? Like, you're not in a hurry, so you just kind of like you can easily control them, and then it's like a kind of got that threat and answer thing where it answers all the man lands and obviously just threatens to lock them under their own sphere of resistance. But I think a couple of the bigger ones were Black-White Control and Enchantress. Those were matchups that I think neither blue-white nor mono-blue could historically beat, and now we just look amazing. And then also Stasis. It's like, yeah. I played against, despite losing to Enchantress, like I felt like I was in the driver's seat the whole time.
I don't know if you've seen this match.
He saw it live.
Oh, I did. What else was I doing during Lobstercon weekend?
I had gone because I finished my match early, and I'm like, oh, Lanny, can I get you a coffee? So I was going to go to the coffee shop. I came back. Rebel and I went. She also had finished her match quick. Came back, and I'm like, going to give Lanny a coffee. I'm like, oh, I don't think he's going to want to interact with anybody right now. I'm like, Rebel, give Lanny this coffee for me. It was the biggest beatdown I think I've ever seen.
Well, it was also totally preventable. Like, you were thinking in your head, like, I should just chain this Xanthid Swarm because then there's no way you could win. And then you did it.
It was like...
we'll have Chris on to talk about the Mindslaver.
The bus is going so fast towards the brick wall, and you can see the bus driver's foot near the brake pedal. It's just like, nah, gas, right?
Yeah, I think Black-White was actually pretty good even without the Tides.
Just from the Flash plan.
Well, they have 26 plus lands. You have 16 that aren't factories, so you have 10 slots that are just dedicated lands, and you just counter their Skeletal Scry, and they don't have any other forms of card advantage. So, yeah. And they don't have any threats. They have Exalted Angel, I guess, but you basically just sit there, and they eventually draw too many lands, and then you just have 7 cards that matter. They don't, and then
Eternal Dragon you can't answer for good though.
Yeah, they tap out and play Eternal Dragon, then they're dead. Like, I don't know. They cost 7 mana. I guess. It's very slow. It's basically
yeah.
Lanny, the thing that is really dawning on me from this interview with David, is like he plays this deck so different than I've ever played the deck, right? And so, David, just
well, David's default is control. It sounds like. Well, okay. So one of the things.
I just want to share an interaction. So Lanny was critical of me recently, where not on the air, but I'm just like airing our dirty laundry in our private Discord.
I would never tarnish my public image by saying anything critical of Mike on air.
Yeah. So like. I was disappointed, right? I lost in the last round to miss top 8.
Once again, ready to quit pre-modern forever.
Right, ready to quit pre-modern. I'm like, this is bullshit. I lost the red mirror. That never happens. My opponent played terrible. I played great. Like yada yada yada. Whatever lies you tell yourself in a game that has a bunch of variants in it, right? So, and he's just like, look, man, should have just played Raczka. I'm like. How do you extrapolate that? Like I played this deck. I'm good at this deck. I'm an artist with this. I got to this point. He's like, I am certain you would have done better if you played Raczka.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm just flabbergasted. His certainty of I would do better. I'm like, I had 0 reps on this deck, among other things.
Me neither, bro. Me neither.
Yeah, he's just like, you play more
Raczka said one thing to me. He said, try to cast all your cantrips before jamming.
Yeah.
Sorry. The line was even better. He said, "You probably already know this," and then he said, "Try to cast all your cantrips before jamming." And even in that moment, I was just like, "Oh yeah, of course I knew that." And then I turn around and I'm like, "Wait, do I know that?" I was like,
"You don't know."
Is that something I know? Right, I was just like, "Wait." I was like, "Yeah, that's super intuitive. Of course you do that." But then all of a sudden, I mean, I've talked about this. I was just like. And then all of a sudden it forces you to actually be like, think about this. But it just sounds like you got there very intuitively because your style was just like, well, I could go now, but I have 5 cards in hand. Why don't I just go later when I have 9?
Why not go when you have 4 lands and you have foil counterspell backup? Why go when you have impulse in your hand?
Yeah.
You can't protect with impulse.
Lanny's argument to me was like, I have played more mono blue Dreadnought than he had. And he doesn't come close to losing a match. So
except for against Toller.
By extension, he's like, you basically needed to win one more game. Like that was his argument. You basically needed to win one more game the whole day, right? Like you would have gotten there if you played Raczka.
I mean, it's
his argument.
Yeah. I mean, obviously,
I don't see anywhere near how he's describing this. Maybe I should, right? Like,
maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe you can actually
all
just
things to all men.
Yeah. But
Chris Toller had a great. I mean, I really like his Enchantress deck, and that matchup is hard. So I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Like if you've never played that matchup, it's super weird, and I don't even know how to play it because.
Well, he had Sabo's Web, so it changed the texture of the matchup entirely.
Yeah, but also he only has 4 win conditions, right? So I think that's one of the things that I look at is he has 4 counterable win conditions. So if you just counter those, he has no way to kill you. Right?
Yeah, but you have to keep the 4 Xantid Swarm off the table, or however many Xantid Swarm. Yeah.
Yeah. So game one, you have at least 8 counter spells. He has 4 win conditions. So game 1, if he doesn't, maybe you daze the first Enchantress, but at a certain point you just say, yeah, draw your cards. Like if you can't contain them because he has 5.
Yeah.
Enchantress effects, you just say, I'm going to counter your ways to win, and maybe he'll Sterling Grove, and you just Vision Charm, win condition, something like that. But then it totally switches. It switches in the post games.
I don't mean to take $9,999 out of your pocket, but I was just talking to Selden, and he's just telling me shorthand stuff, and I'm like, what do you mean? He's just like, just play the Day's Impulse game. And I'm like,
no, you're talking to me. I told you that.
No. Talking to Selden. It's just play the Day's Impulse game. I'm like, what's that? She's like, somebody taps out for Impulse, you just daze them. I'm like, even if you go down on lands, he's like, I guess. And then Lanny looks over, he's like, I always tap out for Impulse. And Lanny now looks terrified, right?
Yeah.
Somebody might daze him.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the ways I test is I play both sides at the same time, and I noticed there's a lot of times where you impulse and people just say, oh yeah, you got it, but that impulse is crucial, and your days it wanes in usefulness very quickly.
Well, you already have an extremely in this conversation, you've talked about countering skeletal scrying, you've talked about dazing impulse, and in the PDF, which we are choosing not to leak to, keep things fun for the rest of pre-modern.
They can turn their screw for $1.
Yeah, they can figure out which screw to turn. You had counter factor fiction against blue-white, and so you're already a counter the card draw spell type of guy, which I think is just unique. Like most blue players, their heuristic is just counter what they draw.
Counter that let the card drawing resolve. Counter Chris Tolar's 4 win conditions. I think is where people's heads are at for the most part.
Yeah. Well, ironically, it's the inverse for specifically Enchantress.
Enchantress, Enchantress, you have to counter the win conditions because, you can't counter Mistress Factory and Fairy Conclave and, Decree. They can kind of counter Decree of Justice, but, it just depends on the deck, and I think that's the beauty of it is you have to figure out what they're doing. And if you want to beat, Stifle Knot, you just have to basically, dodge when people, dive.
So did all of this cooking happen with you sort of playing both sides of the matchup then? Because you kind of downloaded a lot of like I was blown away just because, you just had something that made sense for, again, Stasis, black-white control, blue-white control, mono-blue control, Enchantress, like a lot of these like matchups that are very, very tough to kind of have a strategy, have like a game plan. I think a lot of people in that seat just are going to struggle because they kind of can't figure out, what kind of game to play. But it feels like you just had an extreme amount of clarity when it comes to some like tough matchups. Like even the Enchantress matchup, like you said, it's difficult, but it's just like it's not as difficult when you know what you have to do.
They can't win without lands in play, right?
Yeah.
So, like game 2 and 3, you just make it so they don't ever have a land, and the Chain of Vapor Tide just.
In fact, all of their wild growths fall into the graveyard.
Yeah. So I think you just have to figure out what the weakness of the opponent's deck is and capitalize on it. I played in the Fall Brawl, the Spring Fling, and then maybe 3 or 4 pre-modern local tournaments, and then the rest was just Moxfield, because it takes forever to find someone who's proficient with the deck, plays a good deck, sideboard's right, you play them, and then you also don't know what their side of it is, so like you can jam turn 2, turn 4, turn 20 with Stifle Knot. So how do you determine, when you're jamming on turn 2, what's the frequency that they actually have a way to kill Dreadnought, and if it's very low, then maybe you just do that. But if you're like, man, they had it, but it's like every time, 80% of the time they have it, then that's not a good plan. So I think it's just I think like finding the ultimate turn where you go for it is like one of the big things with this deck. And the factories and the flashes help you with that because you get to play a little bit longer game. You can pitch those cards to foil if you need to, but if you need to play longer, you can. And you don't get chip damage from, 2/2s and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you from firsthand experience that I was just trying to fade 3 copies of Naturalize on my turn 2 jam against goblins, and it did not.
I thought you were going to win that one.
Yeah,
you did not.
We all did. I'm just blown away because I feel like you're not giving me what I want, which is just the like.
What are you talking about? From like a tactical technology?
No.
I want the best episode we've ever had.
No, I want to know.
I actively feel smarter.
I want
in the last 42
That's
minutes.
what did I tell you? That's what I spent the entire weekend. I literally
criticizing my
Friday night
with red decks.
That was your experience of the weekend, but everybody else around me was just like, wow, Lanny is just like, just like on cloud 9 because he has this stupid document. Like I on Friday night, I message David, get the list, get the PDF, which we're gatekeeping. Start reading it, what you wrote, so start thinking about it. And I just felt like my world, I unlocked all of the towers in Zelda that show you the map. Like I was just like living in darkness, and I desperately need you to tell me why it's like that. Like, how do you live in this world of such like tremendous clarity because I asked you a question. I was just like, well, you know, like, how do you get to this plan? And you're just like, oh, you just decide. But other people can't do that, right? Other people don't have, I mean, I'm not saying other people can't, but I'm just saying, like, that's a very difficult thing to access that you just brushed off, which is just being like, oh, I've got this difficult matchup. How am I going to solve it? Like, you solved 5 difficult matchups, like,
hold on.
simultaneously.
David, don't answer him. He's like asking Steph Curry, how do you hit so many 3-pointers?
Yes,
right?
yes.
But the answer is Steph Curry put a tremendous amount of time and effort into learning how to shoot 3-pointers from different distances. Right? He's like, he doesn't have one 3-point shot. He has a different 3-point shot depending on where he's standing, right? That's literally what you said. Sometimes you jam on turn 2. Sometimes you jam on turn 4. Sometimes you jam on turn 20. And like, Lady's just like, well, the 3-point shot didn't work from half court. Like, you use a different 3-point shot.
Oh yeah,
Not
what was
like analogies?
What?
But
I need.
that's
I guess.
literally what
Oh
I'm
yeah, let's
saying.
go into more detail on these inputs.
How about I have a exercise that might help you, like, kind of get into my head here. How do you think about that?
Yes.
So Lanny, you know Robin's Fall Brawl Grotog deck, right?
Yes.
Okay, so this is how I approach the matchup. I look at the deck. I see 4 Meddling Mage. I see 2 Counterspell, 2 Foil, 4. There's no Swords of Plowshares, right? So he has
Olden days.
4 Counterspells and 4 Meddling Mages, and then Quran Dryad and Psychotog are kind of annoying, right? So I look at that and I go, okay, so game 1 I have 4 Vision Charm, I have 4 Counterspell, 4 Daze, and 4 Foil. So I have, what is that, 12? Yeah, Vision Charm, Foil, Counterspell. I don't know. I'm blanking here. But basically, like, I have more ways to protect Dreadnought than you have, like, ways to interact with it. So I can take those dazes and if you're tempoing out Quran Dryads or Psychotogs, I can deal with them. But for the most part, like, I actually feel pretty favored. And the biggest thing, I think the real reason is, if you look at the lands, you have 17 lands plus 4 Mox Diamond. That's 21 lands. So I'm playing 16 lands, you're playing 21. So you have 5 more lands in your deck. So, the longer the game goes, the more non-land cards I'm going to draw, the more lands you're going to draw, and I think that's why it's favored. And then post board, you add 7 reactive spells, but you get Misdirection, you get Powder Keg. I just felt like the density of threats here wasn't big enough that I don't have to jam. Like, jamming is mostly when they have a clock. Like one of the weaknesses of Stifledaunt is when turn 1 and turn 2 they turn 2 they like double spell. Like if they go turn 1 Llanowar Elf and then turn 2 they're like survival and then they're playing another elf. Like, what are you going to daze one of those? You can't really daze that. They protected the survival from a daze, and you don't really want to foil that. So
well, you made it so much more interesting, because it used to be like you would just lose if your opponent had like a Savannah Lions and a Swords of Plowshares. But now the Mishra's Factory stops the Savannah Lions. And that was just something that I never, you're absolutely right. And the reason why I always had Grotog super, super favored, and I changed everything about my philosophy surrounding the matchup over the course of the next few months. You might have been the first domino to fall where I just like looked at it and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I've never lost this. And then the evolution got me to where I am with the Grotog deck. But I thought that the Mishra's Factory thing was so subtle, because Meddling Mage just went coast to coast against Mono Blue. And so it just became Protect the Queen. And it was just kind of like pretty simple. But then once it became like, oh, now we have to protect Mage from Powder Keg, and we also have to deploy a threat that can attack through a Mishra's Factory. That just added to like the material needed to produce a win. And I just didn't see it at the time. I was just like, you just Mage Dreadnought. What are they going to do? And then, as you demonstrated, there's still plenty of options, and you have the Brain Freeze. So
it was so interesting that David is saying that he felt favored when looking at the lists, because I think I played Dreadnought in one serious tournament ever, $1,000 tournament, and I only lost to Lanny. I lost in the Swiss, then I lost in the top 4. Right?
Yeah, but you would have won. You just would have won if you had Brain Freeze. The Grotog doesn't have a viable plan against Brain Freeze besides racing. Yeah, you had Armageddon instead of Brain Freeze as your long game, and like that is one thing that Dr. Surf and Turf 2024 Lobstercon lost, is by giving up Brain Freeze, which we talked at length about with Selden, about how it just kind of didn't quite have the same fit as Tide does. By losing Brain Freeze, you do lose very specifically that angle against Grotog and to some extent the blue-white Dreadnought deck.
I'm sorry, Lanny, that I might burst your bubble here, but I didn't even sign Brain Freeze against Grotog.
Wait, you didn't? Oh, okay, that's crazy.
Yeah,
I don't think it's crazy. I think he's probably right based on all of the things that he said about.
I think that he's probably right too. But
probably right.
All I'm saying is I've never beat a Brain Freeze.
He's not a bad scientist.
I've never beat a Brain Freeze with my Grotog deck.
I would like to say, like, everyone plays decks differently. I don't think there's like a certain way that's the right way. Like, what I've learned more and more in pre-modern is everyone has different opinions, and I think that's great. And
I think
people approach different matchups in different ways, and I think that's what makes it exciting.
I think people play decks differently too, and your way seems like the better way to do it. From everything you're saying, like, I'm just convinced. Like, you're just like, why wouldn't you do it this way? And I'm like, why wouldn't I do it this way? This sounds way better than how I was going to do it.
And like, Factory doesn't seem like much, but against this deck, it has no way to kill other than Armageddon. Like, there's no Wasteland, so what are they going to do with Factory? They're going to Swords it, disenchant it. Like, you're pretty happy if they.
Yeah. No, they have to. They have to, yeah. and it just changed. It just tips the scale. Like, the scale didn't need to be. I mean, that's like the big innovation is that by having Tide and Factory and Flash of Insight, Tide, Factory, and Flash of Insight all are very, very small, like, differences that just tipped the scale in just like 101 different contexts, where it's just like, oh, all of a sudden, like this is just a great example. It's like, okay, well, you were losing to Meddling Mage, but now you just don't lose to Meddling Mage. Now you can now Meddling Mage is no longer an existential threat, and then you can worry about countering fewer existential threats. And I think that's just kind of I don't know, that's it just changes the texture of the entire matchup. Like, whether or not you have a certain kind of approach, that can, like, you can use the Brain Freeze approach if you have the Factory defense plan, if you want to, but you just don't have to be compelled to plug a certain hole just because you have this. I don't know. You have this card that kind of worst case scenario taps for generic.
Yeah, and the flashes with the Factories and the Parallax Tide, they all are synergistic because Flash is expensive, and so you have more lands because you have man lands, and then Tide's expensive, so you have more lands. So they all, and also, the Flash gets you more lands to cast the Tide, so they all synergize. Where if you're trying to jam turn 2, you probably just want to, like, play 4 sleight of hand and more pitch spells.
Yeah,
because you're not trying to play that long game.
I mean, we're a Gears podcast, so it felt like you added 5 gears to the deck.
So I don't understand gears whatsoever. I tried. Let me ask you if this is what a gear is. I see gears as, like, ways to play around your opponent's interaction. Is that basically a gear? I
mean, effectively, yeah. We summed it up. Like, I was very satisfied with my summary of, like, gear 1, kill you. Gear 2, stop you from killing me. Gear 3, kill you eventually.
Yeah, so gear 1 is, I mean, it's weird if you think about it like this, but every good deck is a combo deck, right? If you think about it like a burn deck, right? You're just like, sometimes you have these hands that are all 1-drops, it's all lightning bolts. Your opponent could just basically never win, right?
Yeah.
Like, so every good deck's a combo deck. And that's one of the reasons why decks like the Rock are just not good. There's like how do you assemble the combo deck version of the Rock? There isn't one, right?
Dress therapy, flashback therapy.
Okay.
Gotcha.
And then what? Like, well, now I have 5 turns.
Treetop Village.
to redraw while you attack me for 3.
Combo Rock is one of my spicy decks I'm building, just so you know.
Yeah, right. So, okay, regular Rock, right? Just there's no
good old
combo
Rock
version,
yeah.
right? So, like, gear 1 is just like combo kill you, like run your opponent over. The first person to sort of extrapolate the concept of gears beyond burn to me was BK. He says to me, these are the gears of goblins. Some games you just get turn 1 lackey and your opponent doesn't depose the turn 1 lackey. It's just like, good luck losing, right? Like, it doesn't matter what happens next. Your opponent's going to get run over, right? So gear 2 is kind of like, you're interacting with your opponent much more. And it's like some decks are better at this than others, right? So there are decks that don't have any removal. They're not good at killing creatures, right? They either have to interact with their opponent some other way or they don't.
I mean, the base theory is that you win every exchange. So like the gear
not every
2
deck is actually good at that, right?
Well, it's still like, I think that if you were to apply it to this Dreadnought scenario, which is just like, you win every exchange. Like if you counterspell your opponent's threat and you have you have fewer lands in your deck, right? Every turn that you play, you get farther ahead. And then in the same way that like if you cast a Searing Blaze, which is the emblematic Gear 2 card, for those that don't know, Searing Blaze deals 3 damage to a creature and its controller. Like you're just getting ahead on that exchange, and your opponent is never going to be able to kill you. And
add enough of those things together.
Your opponent,
right. So the argument that Lanny and Fran had really a lot was that if you compared Blue-White Dreadnought to Mono Blue Dreadnought, and this is exclusive of obviously Dr. Surf and Turf 2024 or whatever, just Mono Blue Dreadnought in our imaginations versus Blue-White, is it just lacked a gear, right? That the Blue-White deck, because of Meddling Mage, because of Sword Splashers, because of Disenchant, because of Armageddon, was able to play a better Gears game than Gear 2 game in particular than Mono Blue Dreadnought, which the argument was they didn't have a Gear 2 at all.
Yeah. And right? And Meddling Mage is a super, super emblematic card for that type of thing against in the context of pre-modern, just because it was like it stopped the most important thing that your opponent wants to do by naming the card, and it created some offense. So it was like it's like a counterspell prison version of a Searing Blaze, right? Where it's just like not only is it prisoning them out of a spell, but it's also getting in for 2.
And then the third thing I would say is just listening to you talk, David, in this podcast, in this conversation. I think that from a Dreadnought perspective, you default to Gear 3 when most people default to Gear 1, right? The definition of Gear 3 is that you land your spells. And if you land your spells, you always win, right? So the big problem is people are impatient, so they don't land their spells, right? And so the big argument against Burn, which is what I originally wrote the Gears about, was that people who don't really understand it are like, yeah, Burn, what a great deck to do 17 damage, right? That's the way they think about it. But the way you think about it with Dreadnought, it's just like, well, cast all your cantrips first. I'm just like, oh, that impulse was really important. We're like, why wouldn't I do this when I have all the protection spells? Like, you are a person who, we think about it as like Gear 1 is a combo, Gear 3 is a slow combo. Is how people think.
Well, and it's also the 10 card hand theory. So like as it applies to Burn was just like pretty simple. It's just kind of like they can't, mana becomes the constraining factor rather than hand size. So if they go to their end step and they're holding infinite counterspell, like you can still go burn, untap, burn, with your draw step. Maybe you've got if you're playing pre-modern, you got an Urza's Bauble trigger in there that you can always outrun counterspells, and that's just exactly the same as Portent, Flash, Gush. Just start your turn with as much resources as possible and just kind of overload both your opponent's mana and cards at that point. But it's that
you're using a mana advantage. All your stuff is cheaper than theirs, so you can deploy it all before they can.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would just say, like, maybe from a Gears perspective, like I think that like, because I'm as a replenish player, like it's weird to me when people talk about Tormod's Crypt. Like, so when there's like, oh well, they're gonna get with Tormod's Crypt. Like, I've never been gotten by Tormod's Crypt in my life. I've never been gotten by a counterspell in my life. And like, they're like, what are you talking about? Those are the cards that beat them. Like, no, I just cast a bunch of forecast and cost cards in a row, and my opponent runs out, and then they lose. Right? Like, that's how I play it. Like, if you're in this, like, I only do the thing that you think you're gonna catch me on if I'm already in trouble. Right? So you had to get me in trouble for me to fall into this spot. But otherwise, I have soul lands, right? Like the idea that I would play in a way that would allow you to be opportunistic to me sounds caca. No wonder you're beating people, right? Like, and so, but you're defaulting in a similar way. Just like, why would I jam? I'm gonna win this game eventually. My resource advantage is so high because my cards are cheaper, my spell density is better, and I cast all my cantrips already. The average person doesn't think that way.
Yeah, and if you have if they have 8 relevance cards and you have 16, and there's no, and they're so like if they're attacking you and they're not dead, and you can play Dreadnought and attack twice before you're not dead, there's no reason to play it. Like every turn that goes by, you have a better chance. So why rush it? They might.
Yeah. At that point, the only limiting factor is the fact that your maximum hand size is 7.
Yeah,
but it's
which
not
this deck doesn't care about.
Exactly.
I mean, you have Flash, you have Portent. I mean, I had Sapphire Charm at one point just to like.
Oh, we've talked about Sapphire Charm.
Yeah. So like, I just didn't want to answer the Meddling Mage. I was like, I hate Meddling Mage. Like, I'm just gonna daze it. Like, who cares? Like, I don't need an answer. But like then I was like, I kind of should have an answer, but I don't want an answer whenever I don't need it. So I'm just gonna have this card that cantrips and then can answer in a melee. So that was the whole,
Yeah, but, we got trained to vapor and life was amazing. But yeah, I did think that it's kind of cool that not bouncing the meddling mage is quite good sometimes. But I wanted to talk matchups and just go down the line on some popular decks and get your quick take on the matchups. And I think once we get to, I think I would ask you to introduce any way that you think that a deck can adapt to flip the matchup on Dr. Surf and Turf. Because I think one of the big things is that we demand, as people who want to see pre-modern just kind of continue to churn. I would be very interested in, one, people fully respecting how good this mono blue deck is, but two, in doing that by making adjustments to their deck. I don't have to just Grotog. I'm just going to win every time with Grotog, so I'm not going to make any adjustments to Grotog. But yeah, let's go down the line, popular decks, and talk about where they're starting and what you think they need to do to overcome this new menace. Starting with Green Red Oath.
So Green Red Oath, let me see here. So Green Red Oath, the problem is they have no way to put pressure on other than lands. They don't have, other than they have Call of Herd inside, Terravor in the main. They're just very important spell Light, and the Winter's Grasp, Thermokarst plan isn't very good against Gush and Daze and all that stuff. So so one of the things I got from playing the Tide package was that people were like, that's just overkill. You're going to win anyway. Your deck's still pretty good, but what the Tide does is just take off their clock. They can't hit you for 4 turns in a row because they don't have lands. I think if they want to win, I think that they have a hard time.
Oh yeah, I got a proposal. So Sphere of Resistance is already big game, but one of the problems with Sphere of Resistance we saw on camera, you can just put Sphere of Resistance on the table, and if you boarded out all of your Stone Rains, then your mono blue opponent will simply cast 3 mana Impulse to get their next land. And eventually Tide combo you for 7 or 8 mana if you're not going to do anything. And of course, there's conflict between Rishadan Port and activating your man lands. But hear me out. If we are so reliant on this Sphere of Resistance plan, how about we just don't board out our Stone Rains, and we just try to dodge the Gush?
Yeah, I don't mind it. I mean, I think the problem with Sphere is that you can't Power Blast Tide. So
but we can just keep them from ever getting 5 mana. Or but the games 7
they win.
Mana,
the games they win, they basically usually play a turn 1 or turn 2 Sphere of Resistance, which helps them make it so I can't cantrip very well. I think the big thing is they need just some kind of clock. I don't care what clock it is. Jackal Pup. They decided in Jackal Pup, I'm in.
We've talked we've talked so that we love Jackal Pup against Dreadnought.
Yeah. So Selden told me he thought that the matchup was 80% in favor of Dr. Surf and Turf in sideboarded games.
The only way you lose is turn 1 Sphere, turn 2 Sphere on the draw, because they don't have a clock. You can't beat Stiflenaught without this version of Stiflenaught. You can't beat without a clock. You have to clock them. If you're chapping them for port, you should just try to clock them before they find a Tide. If you're trying to kill them off mana, you most likely hitting them for 5 a turn is probably going to get you more wins.
I think Stone Rain, keep the Stone Rains is the answer, because you're trying to keep them off 5 mana for Tide. You're trying to keep them off. You can be in a position, if you're fast enough, to keep them off the second island for Gush, or just be in a spot where maybe they can Gush for tremendous advantage against one of the Stone Rains, but they're still put behind enough, or that opens up the window for you to resolve a Sphere or stuff like that.
I just want to unpack what you're saying about leaving in the Thermokarst and stuff, which nobody does right now. Are you saying that the matchup is so bad that you'd just rather roll dice? It's just is that really what you're saying? Because that doesn't sound like a strategic decision to me. It sounds like
it's
maybe you'll win the lottery.
It is informed by the fact that the current plan, which is to board in Call the Herd and Red Blast, and Naturalize,
Sucks.
is horrible. Yeah, because you just like David is saying, it's just kind of like, okay, well, you board in all this like Blast, and granted, Blast is going to be an answer to Tide, so Blast is going to be a really great card, right? But you have you're so reliant on Sylvan Library and Sphere Resistance and stuff, Sylvan Library needs you to you're a deck with 32 mana producing spells, right? So the Gear 3 concept that we're talking about means that Dreadnought's always going to come out on top, and the only way you can change this paradigm is by saying okay, well, what's Dreadnought's great strength? Is that it's playing 16 lands. It's well, we have to turn that into a weakness. That's the only opening in the Dreadnought armor that we can attack. And it's also, our entire deck is built around that, because here's the thing, you can't board out Richtenport. They're already blanking your Wasteland, so you're trying not to draw a bunch of these cards. Just sometimes getting your Stone Rain on is going to be good. And part of this is just informed by, now this works better against Grotog because Mox Diamond decks tend to be very poor against Green Red Oath. But yeah, I got Stone Rained while playing Grotog plenty of times because I just had one island in play. And if you land that sphere, if you're on the play, you land that sphere on turn 2. The next cantrip might have to cost 2, and then or the gush has to cost 1, so you can't tap out for Portent. I think it's plausible. And then also, Mono Blue is motivated to board out Days, so then it just becomes like a next level game.
Isn't Misdirection, which David already has now, skyrocket in value against this strategy?
Well, yeah, but I mean, at some point, you just gotta we're talking about land destruction decks here. It's just it doesn't work to turn into. It used to work, right? It used to be plausible that you would just be okay, well, so after sideboard, I have my naturalized Pyroblast game in addition to my Oath game, and I don't need these Stone Rains to do anything. But if you live in a world where this specific deck is always going to pants you on turn 20 or turn 15 or whatever, then you got to make adjustments.
I think about it more. I think if you're on as Red Green Oath, you're on the draw, maybe you take out the spheres. I mean, sphere, you're in a land destruction mirror. You don't really want sphere against that. And if their plan is to only keep a couple of Dreadnoughts in to win after a Tide, maybe you land destruction and then you keep up Pyroblast, because you can't really keep up Pyroblast and play a spell with a sphere in play. That's part of the problem.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Naturalize is the same problem.
Yeah, Naturalize isn't that great.
I agree,
land,
but
so
it's even worse for 3 mana. But you're trying to double spell, and it's just kind of like Sphere is a symmetrical effect. Okay, let's jump over to.
I have 2 other things. So you can increase the blast and then the Goblin Tinker. I think basically diversifying your strategy to onboard interaction is helpful. So if you bring Goblin Tinker, I think that could be a card.
Yeah. Oh, what do you think about Black Vice?
Sure. Yeah, I think Black Vice is great.
That's a little bit of SWB tech.
Yeah, I think that's a good. Yeah, Black Vice, I can see that.
All right, you heard it here first.
SWB's been playing it for months, but sure, you heard it here first.
Well, they didn't hear from SWB because he doesn't podcast. So that's why we're here. That's why we're here, Mike.
He literally's been on our podcast.
I know, he didn't say anything about Black Vice. Replenish. So Replenish game 1s are kind of interesting because they do start with plenty of Plowshare, Seal, Mana Leak Replenish action. So it feels like they have the density advantage, and whatever downside created by having more lands is negated by sort of advantageously looting them.
Yeah, I feel like the Replenish. You can't really go for Dreadnought because they have Parallax Wave, Seal, Swords, Mana Leak, Replenish. They have like 20 cards you have to counter if you're going for that route. Usually Vision Charm, you like a very common play is you Portent them, and if you see an Opalescence or a
replenish,
then you just Vision Charm them.
Portent you, mill you.
Yeah, and if you don't see it, you shuffle. Or no, if you use, you don't.
If you don't see it, you don't shuffle. Yeah,
you don't shuffle. You just let them go for it. Yeah.
Man, I love it so much.
Yeah, so you just
doesn't play Dreadnought like any normal person.
Yeah, you just sit there and you
Portent you, mill you.
Yeah. And because they have.
So we board in Altar of Dementia, and we board out our Stifles, and we board in Altar of Dementia, and then we Dreadnought Altar.
They'll never see it coming.
Decided one legacy weapon. Discard it, return. Shuffle it back.
Okay, so that's our game 1, but game 2, the Tide thing just transforms everything, right? So what are we going to do on the replenish side to beat the Tide plan?
I mean, the Tide plan is basically for replenish, so they're having a hard time. You just need a clock. I mean, basically, all these decks, they're slow and is molasses and do nothing. You just have to have something, some kind of clock.
Wait, so it's time. It's time for, instead of the Dreadnought decks sideboarding in Dan, it's time for decks to side in Dan against Dreadnought.
There you go.
It's Dan time.
I think Meddling Mage is great, I think you Meddling Mage, maybe Chain of Vapor or Tide. And then you play that game. You pick the 2 decks that are like the Tide package just wrecks. So
we're trying to next level. We're trying to next level against the Tide package. I mean, I think that's super relevant. A lot of people are going to be.
I think a null. I think a null's good.
Oh yeah, that's actually huge. Yeah. Well, that's actually that's so rough though. Replenish is the last deck that wants to play a null because Seal Cleansing is just so good in Replenish. So. That's just kind of a.
Used to be Replenish didn't have the full 2 swords to plowshares.
I mean, Seal doesn't do so. The reason that Tide is so good is it dodges all the interaction. People are playing swords and Seal and nothing but a counteracts the Tide plan. Yeah. So that's the problem. I think Seals don't do anything.
Yeah, I think it's I typically dislike Meddling Mage and Replenish, but it is a big deal against specifically Dreadnought, and it's good that it does double duty here. So just remember, audience, we're naming Chain of Vapor or Tide. We're not naming Dreadnought when your hand is full of Orm's Chant, Swords of Plowshares, Seal of Cleansing.
And Waves and Seals.
Oh, sorry. Blue-White Dreadnought, Pseudo Mirror.
I mean, I think the Dreadnought mirrors is mostly about card advantage. So... Flash of Insight, things like that. A lot of times you get to the situations where you don't have any more shrimps in your deck, and that's what decides it. Or, someone. So a lot of times they play Brain Freeze. I don't get why you're playing Brain Freeze against the deck with 4 Stifle, but I don't really like that plan that much. I mean they have the tools. You just bring in a null. All these basically just bring in the counter spell that counters Tide, but in this matchup you don't even bring in Tide, but null's still good. I mean,
you get a null powder keg, but I mean, I don't know. I feel like you can just play the Meddling Mage plan here, and what you would need, and you're just directing your plowshares at Mishra's Factories so that your mages can get in.
Yeah, I think the not, shrimp decks are, it is a mirror.
I just want to say I tested the blue-white side against Dave Kaplan playing mono blue quite a lot recently, and I lost most of the games from the blue-white side, which I found to be very surprising because the whole point of the blue-white deck was supposed to beat the mono blue deck, and the games that Dave won were, I think, very in line with how David is talking right now about just card advantage, right? Like he would gain an advantage, right? And then he would push on that advantage.
Yeah, but we can obviously change that from the blue-white side if we just start playing Flash of Insight.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just behind and then he would just I would have I lost the game by 2 Meddling Mages once, right? And then I'm I'm definitely going to win this game, right? He just answered my Meddling Mages in 1 turn and played 3 Dreadnoughts or something.
He didn't have Factory either, but yeah, that's fair. Mirror's the mirror. What can Burn do? Mog Salvage. Moving on. Next question.
Oh, so actually the Burn, I think Burn deck has no way to answer Dreadnought main, right?
Effectively, no.
You lose 100% of the games the opponent goes first and has a Dreadnought.
And then in the sideboard games, they have, maybe 7 answers to it, but
hopefully
you still have 16 ways to protect it. So I think burn really needs to influence the clock. Like, I don't think you need these reactive spells. I mean, maybe you need these for other matchups. I'm not a burn expert, but like if Goblin Tinkerer, that hits for 1, and I have to spend 2 things that are like a very specific answer, or Fire Stack Pillar, Goblin Patrol.
I mean,
like,
to be fair, you're like a Grim Lavamancer Jackal Pup deck, so if your hand is like all Mog Salvage and Pyroblast, I'm not actually saying Mog Salvage because we still have to play Overload for Sphere Resistance, but if your hand is an abundance of Overload and Pyroblast, and you just have a Jackal Pup, like you'll probably get there, right?
No, you don't. You just don't. I think like the first 4 maybe is worth something, but I think the best way to beat Dreadnought as burn is to have a quick clock and make them have the Dreadnought. If you are playing reactive against Dreadnought, you lose. That's the whole point. So if you're siding in reactive cards that don't deal with the problem.
Yeah, but Ball Lightning is just like so bad against Dreadnought.
Why?
Well, because it costs 3 mana.
Yeah, but I mean,
well, the turn you cast it, you also can't cast your reactive spells.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you also it just commits so much your mana.
Just from a paradigm standpoint, like burn is a beatdown deck that gets out beatdowned in game 1, right? Like by Dreadnought's combo draw.
Yeah.
I think people underrate how many games burn wins if it wins the roll in game 1, right? So it's obviously not a great matchup for burn, but I think burn actually has like a puncher's chance of winning the
because they'll just kill the blue deck on turn 4 if the blue deck doesn't jam on turn.
Doesn't jam, right? Yeah. So, but the way I play it, I just shift. Like I'm not playing a beatdown deck anymore. I'm playing a counter sliver deck. So I get a clock down. A Jackal Pup is the best example, right? But like you just get some clock down.
Yeah, a couple Mog Fanatics can do. And then
you just protect the board state, right? So the all your exchanges are 1 mana, right? So Overload and Blast are 1 mana, which like Dreadnought kind of has to pick the fight. They kind of have to go first. And so you could be in potentially mana advantageous situations there. You obviously fall behind, right? Like, you lose to a poorly placed Daze or Foil, but you're not playing a beatdown deck anymore. I don't want to win on turn 4. I want to win on turn 10, but prevent you from being able to win.
To be clear, the Raczka technology does not affect the burn matchup at all, because you're just not going to bring in Tide, and Chain of Vapor and Mishra's Factory aren't particularly important. Like,
you're actually worse, I think, than just like
than the all-in
Gear 1 blue decks, because you have
I've never lost against burn. I don't know. So
you're worse, but you're still great.
I think if you want to beat it, you have to put down lock pieces. I don't think these reactive stuff where you get the like.
I'm down for a Goblin Tinkerer, to be clear, because that works against the other stuff that you want Overload against anyways.
It literally triggers Oath. Like that's just counter to how you
Oath is boarded out.
but he's replacing a card then, Goblin Tinkerer, that you need against Oath. That's also good against Dreadnought. I don't think you can play it here. Like,
you can play Goblin Tinkerer against Oath. You get a Mox, you get a Sphere.
You just literally you give them a free win
if they still have Oath in their deck.
I mean, I don't know, man. That's a bad gamble. They win game 1 sometimes.
Well, I don't know about other matchups, if they need those cards. I mean, if they need those cards, they're great for the matchup, but like those are very anemic. I mean, you get 2 misdirections and you get 4 Red Blast after board. Like that doesn't even cover the sideboard cards that burn. I think Pyrestack Pillar maybe. I don't know if that's a possibility, but that's something. I want all my cards in burn to actually deal damage. I don't want the cards just to sit in my hand.
You don't have to sell Mike on Detonate.
Yeah.
There you go. He's already the biggest Detonate fan in the world. It's kind of hard to detonate a Mishra's Factory. Let's just move on from Brent. I think
it's doable.
People can figure out.
It's been done.
People can figure out. Goblins, we don't have to talk too much about. Goblin starts pretty ahead and just gets more ahead because of Goblin Tinkerer, namely, but also just like the clock theory that we've been saying. I actually experienced this. Like, I realized that Goblin Warchief is like the actual like. Man behind the throne. It's just like Lackey steals a lot of wins, but it's like after Lackey gets removed.
On the throne, he's the war chief.
Yeah, but
he's not the Goblin Lackey. There's literally a guy named Goblin Lackey.
But yeah, it's fair. He's the chief. The Lackey's Lackey. But yeah, I was just thinking about it. I was just kind of like, war chief, like it's just so funny. It's just like haste as a keyword, just like this is one of the very, very few places you'll find in pre-modern, you know, between like this, Anger, and then, I don't know, Shallow Grave. But like, it's just like, you know, haste as like a concept in Magic, it's so assumed in modern Magic, where every red 3-drop with 3 power has haste, and sometimes it has 4 power. But in pre-modern, it's just like haste is just like so, like, it's so scarce and it's so scary. It's just so difficult for decks to deal with. And you know, a Goblin Warchief on the stack might as well just be game over for Mono Blue Dreadnought, because at that point they're very likely to race a Dreadnought. But yeah, play Goblins if you want to beat Dr. Surf and Turf, right?
I think Goblins is a poor matchup post sideboard. And I think game 1 it's really, you know, play draw dependent. I've lost to Goblins that had 3 Goblin Tinkers and Crumbles on top of Naturalize and Red Blast. But if they just have 4 Blasts and 4 Naturalize and 1 Tinker, I think it's, you know, I think you're slightly favored.
It's actually a good point where you don't want to take, where we're talking about making sure you still have enough offense. I mean, it is a big deal if Goblins has like no offense in the post board games, because
they have
all
Rorik's
blasts.
Blade Wing.
Yeah, they can obviously beat you because they can high roll and get Goblin Lackey every game 1. But you know, they also can mold a 5 or 4 because they didn't hit the Lackey and they were trying, or you know, or you had the blast. You know, they had a mountain Lackey hand, and you just blast the Lackey, and now they're sitting there.
I think in my finals match, both games that I won with the second Dreadnought after they removed the first. So the clock game actually became the thing that matters, right? It's just that they had all the answers, but you know, eventually, like, they flooded out. You know,
You have Flash of Insight, Portent, and Gush.
I had flashes had been boarded out, but yeah,
they have the top of their deck.
yeah, but yeah, exactly. Gush, the card draw matters. Talked about Grotog already. I would say the changes that make Grotog better would be like more like, I think adding accumulated knowledge to the Grotog deck changes the paradigm a lot, because now in the long game, Grotog will undo the card disadvantage of having extra Mox Diamond, whereas it used to just not really do that. And then Nimble Mongoose, man.
I think your new Grotog probably is very favorable because of the AKs, like you said, and then the Call of Herds. I think those are all great cards because they, you know, you get a clock, you get card advantage, and you have enough answers.
Yeah. Terrageddon, also a horrible matchup for Mono Blue, according to Selden. Do you feel the same way?
Well, I mean, that's another matchup where they can beat you if they want you to. So there's like certain matchups, like Burn's never going to really, unless they do a huge paradigm shift, they're not going to really beat you. But like Terrageddon, they can beat you if they want to. You know, they have the tappers. They can just overload.
Oh yeah,
on.
they can have Thornscape Apprentice.
Yeah, you can have stuff like that. I mean, that's the kind of stuff. And the way he built his, so Javier Lugo beat Selden because he had a mixture. So he had like a couple Aura Silence, a couple of Thornscape Apprentice, a couple of Pyroblast. So like, what are you going to do? Bring in the nulls against, you know, 1 or 2 Aura Silence? Probably not. You know, you're not going to bring in Red Blast against, or Blue Blast against Red Blast if they only have 2, you know?
Yeah.
So he diversified his threats. And the worst matchups for Stifle Knot are the non-red aggro decks. Because you have the 4 red or the blue blasts for red, but you don't have like a good answer to Thornscape Apprentice.
Right. I mean, that's where you start splashing for Swords to Plowshares, obviously.
There are a few cards like Mind Harness you could play, but I don't think they're really good. You know,
Mind Harness. That sounds gas.
The Scryfall is also one.
You could dominate that. It's a 1 casting cost control magic. That's only.
Oh my god, that is.
There's also a card that can kill a. What was it? Essence Flare. Look up Essence Flare.
I think this one I think I've seen, but
that can kill a Thornscape Apprentice and a Goblin Lackey. So I was looking at that card, but it's so narrow. I mean, it's very.
It's like Piracy Charm.
Yeah, basically.
Elves also favored for typically the same reasons, right? It's just they have the
multiple. You can't daze if they go like elf. You can't really daze their spells, right?
Yeah.
And then you can't really counterspell because they still get tempo with
play
multiple things to your one. So
it gets a bit closer. It gets a bit closer though, right? Because they just don't have Red Blast like Goblins does, and they're.
I think Elves is a lot worse than Goblins because you can't you have to counter survival.
Interesting.
And if you counter survival, because they can get Akitabi and a bunch Nintuko. Every turn you goes by with survival in play, they're going to win.
Yeah. Because they get the offense and the defense. It's interesting. I mean, but in their non-survival hands, they're just like 1/1s and naturalize. Feels like
and the 1/1s are great because they get 3 or 4 of those on the board. They establish the clock. They have some interaction. Yeah. And like Deranged Hermit, that card, like if you,
it actually blocks. Good point.
Yeah, and he attacks, and they can symbiote it back, and they also have Well-Wisher, so they can.
Oh, Well-Wisher is actually hilarious. Okay, all right, we like it. We like Elves, and also I've never beat a. Yeah, Tanglewire is amazing. I've never beat a biorhythm out of Elves either. So.
Well, you just daze that.
You have dazes in +4 against Elves?
Probably not.
Fair. Right. Black-white control, no hope.
Yeah, no hope. I mean, they can have hope if they want to play, have a clock. You have to have a clock. You have to have disruption. You have to have card advantage. That's how you beat.
So Savannah Lions direct. We just turn into Dead Guile. We just go from Black-white control back to Dead Guile. We just go Savannah Lions, Nantuko Shade, and then have our Gerard's Verdict, Duress Plowshares.
Makes so much sense.
Side.
First turn, Tainted Field.
Yeah. Go. Second turn, Reflecting Pool.
Play Ramojan, Sergeant, and Whipcorder. There you go.
Okay. That solves. Enchantress is pretty good. I think that talking about Toller's list, Sabo's Web cuts off the Tide Factory plan pretty well. And then you're just good in game one, so long as you can get I think if the Enchantress player knows that your plan is to try to cast 4 counter spells in a single turn, then you can sort of engineer a situation where you can get the stuff through, and then obviously Xantid Swarm is pretty good here.
I think they're favored, and I think they can also add cards to make it more favored if they need to. So I think they have an advantage for sure.
Yeah, fair enough. How do you feel against the Rock?
I mean, the Rock, so it's about timing your spells. You don't want to. Both players have to time their spells. You don't really want to duress and Cabal Therapy them until they have a Dreadnought in play. And from the other side, you don't really want to flashback your Flash of Insights until they therapy you. And you don't really want to, cast your Gushes and Impulse until they therapy you. Because you don't want to have 2 foils in your hand and then they therapy and get both. So I think the Rock. I think the Rock can.
That's very astute. It's just that's also doesn't occur to me of just holding cantrips to not have 2 spells with the same name in your hand. I would never thought of that.
Dude, look at all of the aphorisms, right? In this universe, David's never going off because he doesn't go off until he casts all of his cantrips. But he also doesn't cast all his cantrips until he's
gets Cabal Therapy.
It's the Rock deck is just what should I do? I'm in a time warp.
They therapy and they name foil. They don't have foil in your hand, and you intuition, and then you get it, or you impulse and you get it.
Yeah. Or impulse, impulse or insight. Interesting. Landstill.
I mean,
board in
so
Meddling
they
Mage.
can't win if they don't have 4 lands. So you have to make it so you can win if you have less than 4 lands. Meddling Mage is good. Annul. Meddling Mage and Annul are big ones.
I like Annul. Tide Control is kind of funny. I am the Tide Control now.
They have so many lands. I mean, they have 23, 24 lands. So
26.
They can 7.
Oh, 26?
26 or 27, yeah. Board in Dan.
10 more lands,
Dan-Dans are in. Game over.
There you go. I think they could win. I think they are a little bit more inconsistent because they have all these lands. So sometimes they don't have, So basically, Gush and Flash of Insight, you can't really counter. You can counter Fact of Fiction, you can counter Standstill, but what are you going to do? Counter half of a Flash of Insight? So basically, your card draws is protected and there isn't. So you just counter their card draw. They have more lands than you. They flood out. You have spells. You win.
Well, AKs can be tricky to counter.
Oh yeah, for sure. If they have AKs, I think that would be a great way to get more game. AK is great against.
Yeah, AK is just great, period, right? It's just, it's an awesome card. Stasis is pretty interesting. I played against Stasis and just felt in the driver's seat the entire time. I wonder, I mean, I guess Stasis has to, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what Stasis does, honestly.
I think they can go for a brain freeze plan, maybe. I don't know.
Well, same problem,
I think also
though. You just get stifled.
I think a lot of people are just going to place. I think whoever knows the matchup better can win. Wins the Stasis matchup. Yeah. So I think if the Stasis players are playing well, they can do it.
I mean, but if both players are playing well, the Dreadnought player is going to win. Maybe the Stasis player with the help of Sabo's Web could play a plan that revolves around the thing that matters more.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I think those are most of the decks that would be interested in how they have to evolve. So this paints a picture to me. I mean, I'm actually surprised, I guess, by the amount of decks that start with game against this deck, namely Terrageddon, Goblins, Elves, and well, I mean, I don't know. The more we talked about Goblins with you, the more you sounded like you're not really too worried about it.
I beat Goblins when I had 5 or 6 blasts, and then I lost him a little bit because I went down to 3 blasts, and then we at 4 blasts, and I think it's favored, but I don't think it's worth. I mean, you can beat if you want to beat Goblins, you can beat Goblins. Let me just put it that way.
It just scales. It just scales with the amount of blasts that you have. It's fair.
Yeah, and they can do the same. So it's just the arms race. You know, if they want to beat you, they can beat you. If you want to beat them, they can beat them.
Yeah, I mean, they could just play like 2-3 Goblin Tinkerer, and then things get done.
I played the Necro Potence tournament, and that's how I lost. They had 3 Goblin Tinkerers. I think Crumble, Naturalize, Red Blast. It's like, yep, I'm not winning this one.
Yeah.
I think the ways you attack the deck is you double cast spells in the early game, where Savannah Lions into Ryman's Version, Sergeant. I mean, what was kind of interesting was that you could always go big against the Dreadnought decks, but you can't go big against your deck anymore, just because, like, Tide just changes everything. Yeah, you have to go under.
I think that's like that's like a gigantic paradigm shift, though. Like, a lot of people were really comfy playing decks like Black Control Landstill, and other just like, Stasis is a good example, like just other decks that were just kind of like very, very happy to play draw go, happy to play pass. And then Dreadnought then was just forced into a corner where going into game 2, game 3, they were just like, okay, well, I hope my opening 7 has like jam double protection or else I lose, or just hope they don't have it. But now things have just slowly shifted where it's just kind of like, okay, these decks, I mean, every single time we're talking about like Dan, Nimble Mongoose, Call Herd, Savannah Lions, Jackal Pup in our like control decks, right? So
yeah. I mean, you just need some kind of clock. I mean, if you look at the Tide combo, it's basically a 5-for-1. So it's basically drawing 5 extra cards, and then if they can't play any of their spells, it's like another 7 cards. So it's like almost like a 12+ for 1.
If you get it off with chain, which you definitely will with the amount of selection. I mean, all right, that's.
But if you have a board, if you have 3 or 4 things out, then that plan doesn't work.
Yeah. So Dan to the moon, already price spiked because of Dan the format, but only goes higher as we're scrambling to add Dans to our replenish and blue-white Landstill decks.
Why Dan when you can get Stormscape Apprentice? Thornscape's the Apprentice little brother.
Oh. Fair point. Well,
he taps for 1 white. So
you still need offense, though. Well, I guess you'll attack for 2 with the Stormscape until
he attacks for 1. He's a 1/1.
Yeah, sorry, attack for 1 with Storm. Okay. So Stormscape, I don't know. I mean, how about this? 4 Stormscape, 4 Dan in the sideboard. We solved it.
I'm skeptical about Replenish being able to cast a Dan.
Yeah, it's just never gonna happen.
It's like a 2-color deck with like 6+ soul lands, right?
Well, you also have to have the island, right?
Okay. Yeah, that's not.
You both have to have an island.
You both have to have the island. Yeah. So not only do you have to have you also have to have an island.
So people keep talking about Dan, but you just Vision Charm and it kills Dan. So I don't.
Oh my God!
I think it's a good thing.
No, he leaked it.
Every part of the buffalo on Vision Charm. He's just like, portent them and then Vision Charm. Look, now he's got the congratulations on your mountains, Dan player. Like, it's just, it's like a time walk, and it kills. If they have all 4 Dandans in play, it's like a bonfire of.
Well, it's ironic because isn't Vision Charm in Dandan lists or like something similar for this purpose? So I just didn't see it because I just didn't understand. Okay, Dandan's off the list. Stormscape Apprentice
Foil's off the list. Choke is good though. If you had some chokes, I mean that card is a Rex house.
All right. Choke call the herd. Choke in my red green oath sideboard? Question mark.
I think that would be great. And then the ports keep tapping you down. I think choke would be great. I mean, it still runs into a null, but you can't really help that.
Yeah, but so does every card in your deck, right? So turn 2 Sylvan Library, turn 3 choke, or you just turn 2 choke on the play, get them.
So hilarious story. So I beat Mikey P to win a Grand Prix trial in 2001 with a deck that people eventually knew to be called the Rock, right? So Mikey P plays it to win Grand Prix Las Vegas, and I won the PTQ that weekend. So he's like, "Oh, your deck's really innovative. It's really great. Blah blah blah. Would you like to work together for Las Vegas?" I'm like, whatever. I asked Saul if it's okay. So we're with Mikey P, and the great innovation Mikey P makes is to add 1 choke to the main deck. It's just like, this is what's really going to put this Vampiric Tutor deck over the top. So I didn't make day 2. I took the stupid choke out after day 1. Won the PTQ, and hilariously, Mikey P is in the top 8 of probably the only constructed tournament of all time that had no islands. So he's got this stupid choke in his deck. No islands in his top 8.
How did he get to the top 8 though? I mean, come on.
Well,
he choked.
Who knows?
Choked some islands out.
All I know is I took the stupid choke out of my deck for day 2, and I won the PTQ.
All right, choke to the moon. I know a few people listening to this podcast plan on going to the next Stress Crew quarterly and the next Stress Crew monthly. I think the quarterly is going to be in November. I think the monthly is like literally next weekend or something. So pack your chokes, pack your other gear, and your meddling mages, your various colored apprentices, and
but not your Dandans.
No
Dandans.
David's just sitting there. He's like, do I just let Lanny talk about Dandan for like the next 3 months so that I can start vision charming people, or should I say something now?
We're like back to Sapphire Charm.
Yeah. What do you think of a Reality Ripple?
I think Reality Ripple is fine. It's helpful against Oath. I don't know if you have room. I mean, there's a bunch
I
of
think
cards
it's
that are
interesting that you went
over
to
that.
Sapphire Charm before you went to Reality Ripple, I guess.
I had Reality Ripple in my Fall Brawl as a one-of, and then the answers to Metal Mage are so bad in every other matchup, I wanted something less bad. But I like the chains. I think the chains are nice. Dead Guy L is sometimes a tough matchup if they go turn 1 hippie, but you can chain that thing. And sometimes they Goblin Lackey, you just chain it too.
Yeah, fair.
It's quick enough. I lost to Goblins where he went turn 1 Lackey. I go turn 2. He hits me, puts it on CG, and he plays Power Driver. I go turn 2 Dreadnought, and then I had to chump block the Power Driver. So
yeah,
I think I had Sapphire Charm in my hand, and if I had a Chain of Vapor, I would just ran away with that game.
Yeah, you just need to make them pick up 1 Goblin, and then their Power Driver's not big enough.
Oh, I would just bounce the Lackey on turn 1.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah,
that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
he knew which screw to adjust.
You're
just like, well, there are a lot of screws in this factory.
Mono blue.
I would like to say that, it's not like I just came up with this deck myself. I collaborated with everyone I played, in the Fall Brawl, Spring Fling, and locally. Every time I lost, I went back to the drawing board. How can I beat that? And so it's not just me, and there are a lot of people who've played this deck. I don't know if you probably saw on TZ Decks, a certain Lanny Wong was the first TZ Decks tied in the side of Dreadnought. So
I didn't see the whole picture though. I didn't see the whole picture. I just put it in there because I was just like wanted to put Armageddon in the side, and I was just like, wait, what if we did this? And then what happened was I was playing against a mono blue tied opponent, and they had like 11 lands in play. So I tided them, and then I used the stifle on my tide, and it didn't really stop them from doing much. And all of the rest of my stifles and vision charms were in like the bottom 10. So I was just like, I need that stifle back. But no, I mean, obviously Shoulders of Giants, etc. I think that, your process was unique. You did something that, you did sort of the same thing that Sam Black did with his blue tax deck. But I think that it's two things, right? It's like, one, you very clearly are seeing things that other people don't fully realize. Either like, I don't know if it's just like an openness, or just a different like style approach, because like a lot of the things, like the moment that you say it, I think Mike and I are sitting here like, oh yeah, of course, yeah. You're right. You never beat Grotog is never gonna win, or like, oh, this, you'll just use these cards in this way. But I think that you're not giving yourself enough credit for like the fact that, like Mike keeps saying, just like you just knew what screwed to turn, and I think that ended up paying off in a huge way. And I think that I'm interested to see where things go. I think that if anything, I don't know. It could just be maybe a overall net negative effect, because people just have to stop playing black-white control, and that was like the only deck with black mana that exists. Or they, land still.
I think if you go Dark Ritual, Skittering Scourge, Sarcomancy, I think you're gonna beat Dreadnought.
I mean, that's absolutely true, but then you lose to Oath of Druids, and then.
Well, yeah. I mean,
so
you're talking about you want to be feature based. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
but I think
Oath of Druids is a whole.
Reiterated his bid for the PSS, because he's just like, well, I just won't be against Oath of Druids.
I'll simply ban Oath of Druids.
Skittering Scourge Sarcomancy deck.
I want to just say I'm honored that Brian even played my deck. That's a big honor to have someone decide to play your deck for Lobstercon, and that he won it was just like such a joy to see. It made my weekend a lot more tolerable, because I was missing out. I was
watching from the bleachers
there. And then to have you, Lanny, like come back and win the second day, it was like what are the odds?
Oh, the odds were very high. Let me tell you, the odds were immense. I knew. I was just like, this is. I mean, Selden didn't say it like that. I guess he didn't feel like, maybe his path to the top 8 was rocky. And for what it's worth, it wasn't like a clean, just smashed and dominated. But, I didn't know what I wanted to play on day 2. And, you shipped a few words of wisdom and whatever. And it was just kind of like, I don't know. It was inspiring, because it was kind of like, people talk about pre-modern like everything's sort of figured out, or it's just hard. It's just like, I open deck files and start building stuff all the time, and stuff just doesn't click. And granted, it's probably because I'm making cards that aren't playable work, but like I think when I saw the list and saw it in action with Selden, I was commenting that match, and just thinking back to the fact that he was just there on Thursday night. He was just playing Chain of Vapor, and I was just like, oh, well, that sounds dumb. It's like they'll chain it back on your Dreadnought. But yeah, as soon as I mean, my only regret is that I didn't think to like give it my time earlier and just be like, wait, what's going on here? So it was awesome. It forced a reset for me, where it was just kind of like, okay, I have to be more humble, be more open-minded, try to look for ways to think about things differently, because I think my own calcification and patterns of thinking made it impossible for me to have even reached the point that you did, which granted, like, sure, some of it's random and some of it's like whatever, but you had the openness and the sort of tenacity to push things to that point. And I think that I only have that for Grotog, which granted, I mean, I don't know. I'm proud of Grotog, and
I like your AK Grotog. I think that's sweet.
Yeah, I'm pretty hyped on it still. I continue to feel pretty good about it. And
Lanny, would you feel differently like if people started calling AK Grotog Lanny Grotog in the same way that they think of like Phyrexian Rager
As Lanny Rock.
As Lanny Rock.
Like, I mean,
those are
AK
the little
Grotog
branding
is
you would
like
get.
super self-explanatory. Like, it's only like Rager Rock was. Yeah, I don't know.
Rager Rock is pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah,
I
Rager
hate to
Rock.
break it
Well,
to you.
Rager Rock was a pretty happy. Like, people were kind of down to call it. I mean, I currently. No, I wouldn't mind because I'm more proud of the Grotog deck than I am the Rock deck. Because the AK Grotog deck reflects like a lot of evolutions, and my only, disappointment with it is just that I haven't quite cracked the code, and maybe I won't be able to in the shell. And it's interesting because like I think it is really funny that after all these months and years at the point, the thing that you can't fix about Grotog is Mox Diamond, and like it's like it enables the entire deck, but you can't negate the downsides where they come up in certain matchups. But overall, I mean, like I don't know. Mike hates that I keep saying this, but I went and got a sandwich in round 4. I started 3-0, and I was just like, let's just draw and get a sandwich because this top 8 is in the bag. Like, it was just too easy.
I just think that, like, as a person who has over the course of time been accused of a great deal of hubris, that this is your position. I got more equity in the tournament by eating a sandwich.
I didn't say
it from winning the match.
I didn't say like the equity part is obviously patently false, but the vibes part were real. I went and got the sandwich with Nick Pin, so we got to have like a little chat. I bumped into Charles and Edward at the pastrami place, so it was just like nice to take a break for an hour, and kind of kept me grounded and being like, okay, well, I'm still trying to be here to have a good time, and I also just don't want to play a 50-minute Dreadnought mirror, which like very likely ends up in an unintentional draw anyways. So there was that, but yeah, I don't know. I think that. I think seeing it, obviously I saw Seldon play with it. I was like, oh, I wonder how good this is. And then I played it. I beat Burn. I was like, oh, you're supposed to beat Burn. But then I started beating the weird decks. Like I started beating Grotog and Quiet Speculation type decks. And I was just like, okay, like this is everything. And I think I knew, obviously I knew in the back of my mind, I was still blown away on coverage when you were casting multiple Flash of Insight. So it was evident that the deck could do something, especially for the one weekend. Now this podcast's out, now the tech is out, people kind of understand. They're going to start playing Choke, they're going to start playing whatever. Maybe those things will be different, but I just couldn't give up the chance to be playing the deck of the weekend. It was like the first time for me too that I got to play the deck of the weekend. So.
Well, I was very honored and appreciative, and you don't always get validated for deck building. I mean, I think it's probably a very rare thing. And yourself and Brian, they both went out of their way to mention me on coverage, and
Seldon wasn't going to let anybody forget. I don't know about Lanny.
Yeah.
He probably would have.
What are you talking about?
I screen capped the deck name because the deck name was Mono Blue David Raczka.
Yep. Mike missed that because he wasn't looking at coverage, but Tony walks over, he hands over me the dry erase tokens, and he's like, can you write your deck name on it? And I'm sitting there across from Chris, and we're like, ooh, what deck are we playing? But I handed him the card, and it said Mono Blue David Raczka. I said, don't change a single letter. Like, I was like, don't change a single letter of this.
It's very difficult for me to spell this correctly.
Yeah, I actually spelled it incorrectly. I think I put the K in the wrong spot. I think I did Razcka, but it's okay. They got the message across. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm excited because I'm excited for you. I think that you did something, really special, something that pre-modern player that's unique to pre-modern. That's just kind of like, something that we all dream of, getting to have like a classic Michael J. Flores moment where we brew something and it like breaks the format, and I was just hyped, and it just it motivated me to be like, I need to continue to like try to emulate this and try to think different and push things and not slow. I mean, people are losing their minds over the fact that I'm into this deck and not blue-white Dreadnought anymore. So like that should
you're
be.
so vocal for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, he has to finally play it to be a believer, you know.
I've played Mono Blue Dreadnought. Like I played it. It was a litany of things, right? It's just like I never lost to Mono Blue Dreadnought, and then when I was playing Mono Blue Dreadnought, like I was just like, you know, losing in spots where whatever. I mean, I played it on video. I played the Cunning Wish version, which you know, who knows.
That sounds questionable.
Sounds terrible.
Listen. Flash of Insight is pretty crazy at 3+2, but can you imagine 3+3+2?
Oh my gosh. Cunning Wish for Flash of Insight. I love it. There we go. Let's do it.
You're really not winning in Gear 1 with this version.
Well, David, are there any last shout outs, talks, like, you know, what's next for you? What's the next deck? Are you just going to keep it on wraps? Is pre-modern Wakanda, are they going to open their borders? Are they going to consider putting the force field down? You know,
Well, shout out for the Rochester Royals. You know, that's what got me into pre-modern, and all the tournament organizers. You know, Lobstercon is why I play pre-modern. If there wasn't a big event, I wouldn't really look forward to it as much. And you know, Andrew Walker on all the monthlies and Michael Hope. That's all, you know, a huge boon to the community. We opened our borders. You can travel to us now. We've had Syracuse and Buffalo people come up and had a great time. So we're here, and you know, we're available, and maybe we'll have a, you know, GP pre-modern or a Camp David thing coming up.
yeah. Just promise that you'll lend us a little bit of vibranium. rockroyalsmtg.com, ROC royalsmtg.com looks to be the vibe. And oh look, there's a little link to the Discord. I'm just gonna click that.
How far is Rochester from Syracuse?
Like an hour and 10, 15 minutes. Yeah, so like Richard Bork comes down from Syracuse, and then we have some Buffalo people. I think Micah comes down from Syracuse too. So we have people that come. You know, we're shifting towards more pre-modern, old school, and vintage. We mostly just play Legacy to get people
to change, like to convert legacy players to.
You give them a snort.
Yeah.
You give them a snort, and then they like the dopamine. Then they're trapped.
So we do loaner decks on Tuesdays for Legacy. We get about 30 people at the local game shop.
Jesus, the numbers they're talking about are ludicrous to me.
And then we use that as a gateway into, hey, you should come play some Rochester Royal events. I mean, you think it's ludicrous, but I mean, Magic the Gathering, this is one of the hubs of where it came from. You know, Richard Garfield came to RIT, this to my knowledge. He went to college here, so we have.
He went to the University of Pennsylvania, which is where Magic was created, at the David Rittenhouse Labs. I know this because I went to the University of Pennsylvania, and my early people I played with were his playtest team.
Okay, so I don't know if there was he has a PhD, so maybe it was undergrad or something.
Yeah, but Magic was created at Penn at the David Rittenhouse.
Yeah, and that's close. So I mean, there's a lot of ties.
Fair.
And we had a great group of people. You know, I think most people would lend you a deck, you know, pay for your flight. You know,
Randy's in.
Listen,
in. That's all you had to hear.
If you're telling me, I just go to my wife and like, look, I know you really wanted to hang out this weekend, but I'm getting flown in and wined and dined by some Rochester sickos. So it's just like, I don't have any control. They already bought the ticket.
Is there iconic food to eat in Rochester?
Garbage plate, baby.
Garbage plate, yeah.
What is garbage plate?
It's all the things that Michael J is not allowed to eat.
It's basically carbs with meat on top. It's macaroni salad, fries, coleslaw, things like that, and then you put, you know, burgers or hots on top with meat hot sauce. It's usually a drunken food thing. You know, you don't normally eat it for health.
So So I can ape this. Like, Randy's just like, look, they're flying me to Rochester. Not only look, I know you think this is a Magic the Gathering thing, but it's actually a culinary experience.
There you go.
I'm there.
We have some nice restaurants.
I'm going to review Garbage Plate.
Well, I was
food blog.
I told everyone, like, I can't go to Lobstercon this year, and I mean, someone reached out to me and was like, if it isn't for, like, you know, I'll pay for your flight.
Yeah, what'll it take?
You know?
Yeah.
but I just couldn't
That
do
is
it.
incredible.
But that's the kind of community we have, and people will, if you're going to a big event and you need, dual lands or whatever to play, or box diamonds, we'll help each other out, and
Yeah, I mean, that's sweet. And I mean, shout out to the Spy Colony community. I wanted to get a moment to say, like, we were in the house and I needed, I was just kind of asking around. I needed more unglued islands. I got hooked up with unglued islands and unglued lands in general from Bryce, Rich, and Charles. And then Charles also set me up with black bordered Mistress Factories to play in my Dr. Surf and Turf list. Andy Levine shipped me or he didn't ship it, but he wasn't in our house, but he was at our house every day.
But he was of the house.
Yeah. He was at our house every day until, like, he was the last one to leave, basically, once people went to sleep. And he set me up with the Chain of Vapors and Flash of Insights I needed. And yeah, I'm sure, the community really is the deal, and it's awesome to hear that you have that up there, and I absolutely would love to cross-pollinate and take the drive up. I used to go to school in the Ithaca area, so maybe I can try to turn it into like a little Finger Lakes nature trip where I
could visit Clark or something, right?
There's some people carpool up from Ithaca. I wanted to blow your minds there, Andy, because you keep on saying Dr. Surf and Turf. My initials are DR, but I'm also DR squared. And I am actually a doctor.
Oh, my Lord.
So every time you say that name, I'm just like, I'm a chiropractic doctor, chiropractor, but, do you have a DR in front of it?
Doctor, what's the letters for chiropractor? Like CD?
DC.
What is it?
Doctor Chiropractic, DC.
Oh, DC. So,
yeah.
Okay, we'll think of something good for that. So you're just DRDC Surf and Turf. I mean, it should just be surf. I messaged it to Phil Wynn, and he's like, isn't it just Surf and Surf? And I was like, it is Surf and Surf. Because it was dumb for me to say that tide is turf when tide is tide. It's surf. And the shrimp is surf. So it should just be Dr. Surf and Surf. But we're in too deep.
That's actually a great name. Dr. Surf and Surf is awesome.
Well, it's Dr. Surf and Surf.
Dr. Surf and Surf is actually just the best name.
DR Surf Squared.
DR Squared
Surf
Pink
Squared.
peppercorn shrimp. You can do that too.
Pink peppercorn? Yeah. What's that?
It's a little bit spicy.
It's a little spicy. Oh yeah, because I said it's pink peppercorn. I was like, it's not hot sauce. It's just a little bit of pink peppercorn, but it's all it takes to elevate the dish. Okay, so we will be accepting pink peppercorn shrimp. We will be accepting Dr. Squared Surf Squared, Dr. Surf and Surf, Dr. Surf and Surf, Durder Surf. Continue writing in until, of course, the discourse becomes about how annoying we think deck names are.
There you go.
David, it was a pleasure. David Raczka, ladies and gentlemen.
I feel so much smarter. Oh
yeah.
My gosh. And I felt smart.
Yeah.
So, and
we know.
I felt smart. I feel so much smarter. This was really, truly a joy. Thank you so much for coming on, David.
Yeah. It was one of the best technology podcasts. Yeah.
Now you're so much smarter, Michael. You're going to come with like a fourth gear. It's going to happen.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, reverse.
I can't count that high, so I only know 0, 1, and more than 1. Those are the 3 gears: 0, 1, and more than 1.
I'm very glad that this was the first time, but it certainly won't be the last. And I can't wait to see what you cook up next. And it was just great to have you. And also finally, we've chatted for a while, so it's great to have this combo. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Lanny and Michael, and I hope to see you around and see you again.
All right.
Awesome.
Love Spy Colony.
Love Mike. Bye.
Game over.